Okay. Guys, we are back, I think. So sorry about that. We are working to get our stream rocking and rolling. I think everyone's probably migrating over from the old chats. We're not quite sure what happened. Sometimes YouTube does that. They can just cut your live feed and get us back up. We are going to wait for a second and just get everyone back in. If you're back in, give us Air 5 in the comments. You probably got to saw me and Aaron just talking to each other as this started. But yeah, give us an Air 5 in the comment section if you are back up. Oh, I'm seeing people going crazy on there. We are sorry. Yeah, so we're going to hopefully get this going again. We'll re-roll Tracy's video because it is awesome, and we want you to catch that. It is good. I have 25 people back on it. High five, people. Yeah. Welcome. Let's go ahead and re-roll that Bible video with Tracy, and I think hopefully we'll get people back on while it is going. Yeah? Let's try it.
Hey, cow friends. Hope that you guys are getting by in your little quarantine. My name is Tracy, and I'm going to talk to you a quick bit here about how to read your Bible. That's our new cool cow segment that we're doing. So, wanted to share with you a few thoughts about how to read this great book, because this is an amazing book and it has a lot of great truths that help us learn so much about who we are and, more importantly, about how God loves us. But if we're honest, it can be super confusing. Depending on where you start and what page you open it up to, sometimes you read these amazing stories of Jesus walking on water, or the disciples hanging out, or Moses parting the Red Sea, and other times you open it up and it's these weird rules and all of this weird discussion about who should eat what and how to build things, and sometimes it's just really hard to make sense of it. So the one thing I want to tell you today to remember when you read your Bible is simply this: remember that the Bible is a story. It's one big story about God's love for us at the beginning of time, and God's goodness and faithfulness to us and love for us at the end of time. And inside that one story, there's a lot of little stories. Just like in all of your families, there's this great story of love that creates whatever shape of family you have. And inside your family, there's a lot of little stories, your brother's story or your sister's story or your dog or your hamster's story. I don't know who's in your house, but there's a lot of other stories. And so whenever it gets confusing and you're struggling to understand something, stop and ask yourself, what's the bigger story? The Apostle Paul, he's in the New Testament. He can be kind of confusing. He talks a lot about what we're supposed to eat and what we're supposed to do. He talks a lot about rules, and sometimes it's not making a lot of sense. But if you flip back into the story and look for who Paul was and why these things mattered to him, you'll understand more. Like, for example, all of us now have these weird rules that we have to live by in this pandemic. We have to wear these face masks now, and we have to stand 6 feet apart, and we can't go in that store, but we can go in this store. But when we go in that store, we have to stand a certain distance away, and all of our medical workers have to wear these big face shields, and it's a confusing time for us, but it makes sense. We understand why, because we're living in this pandemic. But picture yourself 1,000 years from now reading the story of our time, and maybe you didn't know there was a pandemic, and you're just thinking, gosh, that was weird. Why would those people wear face masks in 2020? But if you understand the story, you understand why people do the things they do and how they lived to honor God in what they were doing. So, if you don't know how to find the big story inside the little story you're reading, ask me, ask Steve, ask Heather or Aaron or Pete or your herd leader, or ask your parents or Google it. But whenever you get confused about something, remember, it's not just this weird list of rules or odd customs or people who lived really a long time ago. It's a story, and the more you understand the story, the more you understand the God who wrote this story and who continues to write our stories. So, cow friends, I hope that helps. Hopefully that gives you a little encouragement as you work on reading God's story. Have a good week, everybody.
welcome back. So sorry about that. We're not honestly sure exactly what happened. I see some ideas going on that someone reported it or something happened. I don't think that's the case. YouTube is run by Google. They just have computers that are just constantly checking everything for stuff. I'm sure that it was just there was a lot of traffic on this channel, and so it was going for a long time, so they dumped it. It happened during high school group once too. Don't worry about it. It's just one of those things. But we're glad you guys are back. I see most everyone is back. Sorry about that. We're just gonna continue like nothing happened. Do you guys want to play a game? Yeah? I'm assuming everyone's saying, yeah, a game. We're playing a game. Here's the deal. I'm going to pull this in front so we can show it off. Check it out. We're going to play a game called What's in the Box. This is going to be a boys versus... I'll move it here so I can talk. Ooh, Clorox wipes. It's going to be a boys versus girls game. Here's how it's going to work. I brought a whole bunch of silly things from my house so that you guys can... I was for Heather to try, and Heather brought a bunch of silly things for me to try and get. And we're going to play boys versus girls. Here's how it'll work. I obviously know this is Clorox wipes, but just for an illustration, there's going to be something in this box that you can see. We have a contraption. Aaron's actually going to do it right now. It goes over the screen. Oh, it's covering the camera.
Whoops.
Aaron's making mistakes. Everyone say, Aaron. It's going to go over the camera so I can't see what our feedback screen says, but you can see what's in the chat. So Aaron's going to be our gopher guy. He's going to bring stuff, put it in the box. I can't see what's in there right now. I have no idea. I'm going to reach my hands in. I'm going to try and figure out what is in there. If I get more right than Heather, boys win. If Heather gets more right, then girls win. Here's how your role, or here's your role in this. You guys get to help me. So I can't see the screen, but I can see the comments. I can see the comments. I have a TV over behind the camera here. I can see the comments. So you guys, so this one it's Clorox. Good job. You guys can give me clues in the chat. If anyone says what it actually is, if anyone says it's Clorox, if we see the actual word of what it is, it's -5 points for that gender, and our moderators are going to kick you out for 5 minutes. So don't cheat, don't ruin the game. But if it's like Clorox wipe, you could describe them and say, hey, it's a thing that's wet. It's a kind of, or you can't say wipes because Clorox wipes, but it's a thing that disinfects, or you can describe it. It's a thing that nobody can buy. Cool? We understand? I'm assuming everyone's like, oh yes, we understand. Cool. Well, Heather, you want to go first?
Sure.
Heather's going to go first. I'm going to hand my friend Erin this box. She can't see what's happening. Clorox wipes, if anyone needs them. We got them right here. Erin's going to put a thing in there very secretly. Come on up, Heather.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited. What is going to be in the box?
We're going to
Something
put it...
from Steve's house. I don't know if Allie knows what it is.
Oh, not yet. Hold on. Gotta do the big reveal.
Oh, true.
So there's a thing in the box. Heather's going to reach her hands in and try and figure
All right,
out
girls,
what
help
it
me
is.
out.
Girls, you got to help in the chat.
It's some sort of like wheelie thing with something inside of it. What's inside of it? It's probably something with a cat because I know they like cats. Okay, it's a cart. And is it a sheep? There's like, it's fluffy. It can come out. I don't need to do that if I'm not supposed to. I'm breaking it. Someone help. Girls, where are you?
Guys, Heather got it right. It's a little train cart. It's a cart. You can see it, Heather. It's a cart with a sheep in it.
That's so cute.
I found this in our basement. I don't even know what it is. Aaron, you can get one for me now. It's a little cart with a sheep in it. It's a little sheep. It says New Zealand on it. It's in a cart. It's actually part of a bigger train, but I decided that cart with a thing on it is good. Jackson DeKuyper says cage. Kind of is a cage. I didn't really know, but we gave it to Heather. But Aaron is bringing up the next thing for me. That's 1 point for the girls. Bravo, girls. Great stuff. Oh, goodness gracious. This is scarier than I thought. I have no idea what's in here. I hope it's not a live animal. So you guys can see this. Can you see? I can't. I don't know what's in there. I'm going to reach in. All right, boys, you better help me with this. It feels wooden. Oh, goodness. It's got a thing that sticks out of it. Can you see it's got a thing that sticks out of it? It twists. A farm animal. That's Charlotte still helping the cage. We have a little 30-second delay here, so I'm waiting on the boys' help. The thing that comes out. Oh, it came out. Cool. It's small, Drake. Thank you. It's the same color as the box, so it's brown. Perfect. It's small. Thank you, Jody Page, Jackson, or Peyton. Not sure who that is. Oh, I can't believe you're touching that. I know what it is. A wooden animal that makes a sound. It's a frog. Jackson the Kuiper, you just lost us a whole bunch of points if it's a frog. It is a frog. It's one of those wooden music frogs. Jackson the Kuiper, you just lost us 5 points. Jackson! Wooden frogs. All right, we're just going to say boys don't get it. Right, I was going to get it. It was one of the frogs. I knew it. Jackson, you can't say what it is. You can't say what it is. Ruin that one. So girls are winning 1. We'll say -2. Is that fair?
Sure.
-2 because the boys kind of couldn't hold it in. So -1, or no, yeah, 1 to -2. Girls are winning by 3.
All right, girls, let's go. I believe in us. We started out strong with a sheep in a cart, and let's see what's next. See, this is kind of nerve-wracking. Oh, here we go. What? What is this? It feels gross. It's definitely in like a in a Tupperware. Is it like? Let's see. I want to see what my friends have to say. I'm gonna wait until they pop up. We have a 30-second delay. Is it old? It feels like it's like hardened food. Any ideas? Help me out, girls. Help me out. Is it like old rice? Is it? It's wet. Oatmeal? Is it old oatmeal?
It's oatmeal. Guys, it's old oatmeal. I made this afternoon for Heather. It's oatmeal. Anyone want some oatmeal? We're going to have a snack time in a couple minutes, so someone can have it. Aaron, here's a box. Well, let's do one more each. One more each. Does that work? Girls have 2. Boys have -2. Jackson, I know it wasn't a real frog, so maybe I was being a little harsh. I'm sorry. I see you commenting that it wasn't a real frog. Jackson, we're gonna say boys are back to 0 because Jackson, I was a little harsh judge, and you're getting abused. Don't abuse Jackson. He's my friend. Jackson, we're back to 0. Just regular 0. Or should I get a point? Because I did say frog right after that. Should we give the boys a point? No.
Don't,
right.
Not yet.
Oh, I won't touch. I'm sorry. So boys, we're back to 0 because I decided I was mean. So it's 2 to 0. I have a chance. We'll say this is worth 2 to make it, so I can catch up. Is that fair, Heather?
I'm so sorry. What'd you say?
Is this worth 2?
Yes.
I decided it's worth 2.
Yeah, it's worth 6.
Oh my gosh! I didn't like that. Oh no! It's wet. Oh, I don't like that. I don't like this one bit. Oh my gosh. Oh. I don't want to play this game anymore. Is it some sort of like food content? But it's not getting wet on my hands. Why aren't my hands getting wet? Oh my gosh, I hate this so much. Oh my gosh. It's green, weird blob thingy, okay? I'm on board with that. Oh my gosh. Is it like slime? The slime sting that people make?
It's slime.
Guys, I got it! 2 points for the boys! We're tied up, boys! Oh my gosh, guys, it's horrible. Oh, it looks like a booger. It feels like a booger. Oh my gosh. How do I even get this out of here? How do we do that, guys? That was the worst thing. A brains consistency. Good stuff. All right. You got one more for Heather?
Yep.
All right. Aaron's got one for Heather.
Heather, I need you to.
We are tied.
Plug your ears.
Social distancing.
Plug my ears. Oh.
Heather's got to plug her ears. Plug your ears,
Okay.
Heather.
I'm
Guys,
gonna sit for. Or no.
it is tied 2 to 2. If we are tied, we will do one more. We need the girls to not get this, so boys, don't help her in any way. Girls, I hope that you give terrible clues. That was the grossest thing. I did not like touching that one bit. Aaron is getting this ready. I'm going to keep talking loud so Heather can't hear what is happening in the box because it's a thing. Perfect, Heather, it's your turn. Heather, it's your turn.
Oh no! All right, girls, let's go. Oh no! I'm gonna roll up my sleeves. I feel like this is gonna be messy. What is this?
You're probably gonna need to really get in there.
Do I need to get in there? Oh gosh, it's like pudding. Or like more food. Is it? Oh, is it something? Would you put it on your face? Maybe. Is it like a?
You might.
I can't smell it. I feel like I should be able to smell it. Can you guys smell it? No. No. Okay. It's a condiment. Is it mayo?
Yeah! It's mayonnaise, girls win! It's mayonnaise!
So nasty!
It dripped. Guys, girls win! Girls win! While we get cleaned up from all this grossness, we're gonna take a break, and you guys get to have a snack. I'm moving this table. We're gonna have a snack break. Find a snack. Don't eat mayonnaise because it's super gross. And let us know what you're having in the chat. Take a snack break. Happy snack break, everybody. Did you guys have a good snack? I had some plantain chips. My mouth's really full right now. I'm gonna put them over here. Oh, there's tables still there. Threw them on the ground. Hi guys, welcome back. Oh my gosh. I should have not waited. I should have waited. Oh, but look at it on the screen. I should have waited till I wasn't eating, but that's okay. Everybody. Whew. That was really gross. I feel kind of bad that I put mayonnaise in that thing for Heather, but bummer. Cool. Guys, we are going to get after it. We are going to move into our teaching time here at Cal. We have been going through a series that we are calling Hope. And what we have been looking at is what does it look like for us as followers of Jesus Christ to live hopeful lives in the midst of hardship. Something that's just true about our lives right now is this stuff is kind of hard. It's kind of hard, and so we want to look at how can we be hopeful in the midst of this. And so to do this, we have been going through different Bible stories and then looking at how the characters themselves had hope. Last week we talked about Esther, who's this awesome hero in the Bible. If you haven't read her book, check it out. It's short. You can read it in like 2 sittings. Do it. Today we're going to talk about Ruth. Ruth is another Bible book from the Old Testament that is awesome. As we jump into Ruth, I'm going to encourage our chat to chill out a bit. Calm it down a little bit in the chat. We're going to jump into Ruth. Before we hear, I have a quick teaching. Heather's going to teach a little bit. Before we do that, though, we actually want to watch an overview of the book of Ruth to kind of give you guys some context of what is happening in Ruth. Check it out. All right,
The
we
Book
are
of Ruth.
running late.
It's a brilliant work of theological art, and it invites us to reflect on the question of how God is involved in the day-to-day joys and hardships of our lives. There are 3 main characters in the book: Naomi the widow, Ruth the Moabite, and Boaz the Israelite farmer. And their story is told in 4 chapters that are beautifully designed. Let's just dive in and see how this all unfolds. Chapter 1 opens with this line, "In the days when the judges ruled," and it reminds us of the very dark and difficult days from the book of Judges. And here we meet an Israelite family in Bethlehem, struggling to survive through a famine. And so in search of food, they move on to the land of Moab, Israel's ancient enemy. And there the father of the family dies, and the sons marry 2 Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. And then the sons, they die too. And so they leave only Naomi and these new daughters-in-law. And so Naomi, she has no reason to stay anymore. And so she tells her new daughters-in-law that she's moving back home. And Naomi, she knows that the life of an unmarried foreign widow in Israel is going to be very hard. And so she compels the women to stay behind. Orpah agrees, but Ruth does not. She shows remarkable loyalty to Naomi, and she says, "Wherever you go, I'm going to go. Your people will become my people, and your God will become my God." And so the 2 of them return to Israel together. And the chapter concludes with Naomi changing her name to Mara, which means bitter in Hebrew, and she laments her tragic fate. Chapter 2 begins with Naomi and Ruth discussing where they're going to find food. And it just so happens to be the beginning of the barley harvest. And so Ruth goes out to look for food, and it just so happens that she ends up picking grain in the field of a man named Boaz, who just so happens to be Naomi's relative. We're told that Boaz is a man of noble character, and he notices Ruth. And so after finding out more about her story, he shows remarkable generosity to her. He makes these special provisions so that the immigrant Ruth can gather grain in his field. And in doing so, Boaz is actually obeying an explicit command of the Torah to show generosity to the immigrant and the poor. Boaz is so impressed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi. He prays for her that God will reward her for her boldness. So Ruth comes home that day, and Naomi finds out that she met Boaz, and she is thrilled. She says Boaz is their family redeemer. Now, this family redeemer thing, this was a cultural practice in Israel where if a man in the family died and he left behind a wife or children or land, it was the family redeemer's responsibility to marry that widow, to take up the land and protect that family. So Naomi, she begins to hope that perhaps there might still be a future for her family. Chapter 3 begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan to get Boaz to notice their situation. So Ruth is going to stop wearing clothes of a grieving widow, and she's going to show signs that she's available to be married. And so Ruth goes to meet Boaz on the farm that night. And as she approaches, Boaz wakes up and he's totally startled. And Ruth makes her intentions very clear. She asks if Boaz will redeem Naomi's family and marry her. Boaz is once again amazed by Ruth's loyalty to Naomi and her family, and he calls Ruth a woman of noble character. It's the same term used to describe the woman of Proverbs 31. So Boaz tells Ruth to wait until the next day, and he will redeem both Ruth and Naomi legally before the town elders. And so the chapter ends with Ruth returning to Naomi, and they marvel together at all of these recent events. In chapter 4, it all comes together. It turns out, at the last minute, Boaz discovers there is a family member who's closer to Naomi than he is, and he's actually eligible before him to redeem the family. But at the last second, this family member finds out that he's going to have to marry Ruth, the Moabite, and so he declines. But Boaz, remember, he knows Ruth's true character, and so he acquires the family property of Naomi, and he marries Ruth. And so just at the beginning, how Ruth was loyal to Naomi's family, so now Boaz is loyal to Naomi's family as well. The story concludes with a reversal of all of the tragedies from chapter 1. So the death of the husband and the sons is reversed as Ruth is married again and gives birth to a new son, granting joy to Naomi. And this symmetry between the opening and the closing, it's even more remarkable. So remember, the opening tragedy was followed by a great act of loyalty on the part of Ruth. And that is now matched by Boaz's act of loyalty that leads to the family's final restoration. And this symmetry, it highlights the design of the internal chapters as well. So each of the chapters begins with Naomi and Ruth making a plan for their future, and that's followed by a providential meeting between Ruth and Boaz, and each chapter concludes with Naomi and Ruth rejoicing at what's taken place. This story is beautifully designed, and that design actually connects with a really interesting feature of the story, and that's how little God is mentioned. Right? The characters talk about God a few times, but the narrator actually never once mentions God doing anything directly in the story, and that's its brilliance. Because God's providence is at work behind every scene of this story, weaving together the circumstances and choices of all these characters. So Naomi, her tragedy leads her to think that God is punishing her, but actually the whole story is about God's mission to restore her and her family. And he's doing so through Ruth, through her boldness and loyalty, which brings healing to Naomi's life, but not without Boaz, who's a no-nonsense farmer who's full of generosity and loyalty. And so God uses his integrity combined with Ruth's boldness to save Naomi and her family. And so this story brilliantly explores the interplay of God's purposes and will with human decision and will. God weaves together the faithful obedience of his people to bring about his redemptive purposes in the world. And that leads to the real end of the story. The book of Ruth concludes with a genealogy, showing how Boaz and Ruth's son, Oved, was the grandfather of King David, from whom came the lineage of the Messiah. And so all of a sudden, these seemingly mundane, ordinary events in this story are woven into God's grand story of redemption for the whole world. And so the book of Ruth invites us to consider how God might be at work in the very ordinary, mundane details of our lives as well. And that's what the book of Ruth is all about.
Awesome, guys. So that's the book of Ruth. Fun fact, we as a church in all services, so this Sunday you're going to hear it, or next Sunday, we are going to just be starting a series on Ruth. So you guys are going to be able to dive into this. I want to jump straight into, I put together a little teaching video talking about some of the themes that we can pick up about God in Ruth. Check it out. As we continue our Hope series today, as we look once more at what does it take for us to keep faith, to have hope in the midst of hard times. As we jump into that today as a community, we are opening up our Bibles to the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is one of these great examples in the Bible of a story of God's faithfulness in a time of hardship. As you just saw, the family at the center of this story, Naomi and her husband and her two sons and daughters, the family at the center of this story is facing an immense hardship. Naomi loses her husband, her two sons, and you see this bitterness welling up in her. You see this hardship, this challenge that threatens to overcome her. When they go back to Israel, at this point it's just Naomi and Ruth. Ruth has had this moment of immense loyalty to her mother-in-law. They go back to Israel, where Naomi is from, where she grew up and her sons grew up, and they get back to their town, and the women of the town gather around her and they say, can this be Naomi? And she says, don't call me Naomi. My name is Bitter. She changes her name because she's so overcome by the grief that she has experienced. The Bible doesn't shy away from this. The Bible doesn't hide the hardness of life. Life is hard. The world is broken. Things are not as they should be, and that's why as a church, as a people, we are longing, we are yearning for the time when Jesus will make all things right, when he will restore things to as they should be. But in this time, in the lives of these people, in the lives of so many of us, stuff's hard. The Bible doesn't shy away from that. Naomi is just raw emotion. She says, don't even call me Naomi. My name is Bitter. There's a temptation that we have sometimes in points of hardship, whether it's our own or someone else's. We feel like we have to find the silver lining, and so we'll say to people, don't worry, God is doing this for a reason. But when we say that, I think we get God a little wrong. Because when we say, oh, maybe this pandemic is happening for a reason, when we start to look at why is this happening and what did people do to make this happen, when we start looking at that, we start thinking about a God who would kill all of these people just to prove a point or just to make something else good come out of it. That's not the God that we believe in. Instead, the picture that we see again and again in Scripture, and the picture that we see in the book of Ruth, is that we have a God who, even in the midst of the most brokenness, even in the midst of the most challenge and hardship that happens in the world, because the world is broken, even in the midst of that hardship, we have a God who works to redeem. He redeems even the most broken of situation. He redeems, he fixes even the most challenging, the most broken and hard and mournful time. He will redeem those things, and he can bring about good purposes even in the midst of stuff that seem irreconcilable. Naomi talks to her friends and she says, "Don't even call me Naomi, I am bitter." And then over the next couple pages, we see God working. He's working behind the scenes. He's working in Naomi's daughter-in-law, Ruth, who is the hero of this story. She's a rock star. He is working in this guy, Boaz. It calls him the kinsman redeemer. It's a old ancient Israelite custom, but that word redeemer is important. God is working in Boaz to redeem what is broken. That's the God we serve. God is not doing this for a reason. God is not giving people this illness just to prove a point. But in the midst of this hard time, in the midst of Naomi's hard time, God is working through his people. He is working through our community. He is working through the people in your lives. He is working through your family to redeem what is broken, to fix what seems unfixable, to bring hope in the midst of hardship. And that's what God does here too. We've talked a lot about Naomi's bitterness. Catch what she says at the end. At the end of the book of Ruth, after Boaz and Ruth have a baby, the women again gather around Naomi. Remember that image before? The women gathered around her when she got back and she says, "Don't even call me Naomi." Now they gather around her again and they say to her, "Praise be to the Lord, who on this day, who has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel." They gather around her again and they praise God for what he has done. God redeems even the most broken of situations. God will redeem whatever is wrong and broken in your life too. That is the God we serve. God is a redeemer. We see this in the person of Jesus. Jesus gives us hope that what is broken will be whole again. That is the message of the Bible, that God is our Redeemer. Trust in that and know that to be true.
You guys, if you haven't read the story of Ruth on your own before, I want to encourage you to do that. It is a super good story. And when we're talking about stories of people finding hope in hard times, Ruth is a really solid one. And the story of Ruth is really cool too because it's amidst these historical books where they're looking at all of the, the royalty, and then it stops and it zooms in on this story of these average peasant people who actually aren't very average because they have this extraordinary faith. And so check it out on your own, absolutely. Now, we think it's really important to talk about how we can apply these stories to our own lives. And just given time, we had a lot of fun with the game. We are going to post a video of how you can apply this story to your life tomorrow or tonight on Instagram. We're going to send it out over text, and it'll be on YouTube as well. So I want to encourage you as you process the story of Ruth to check out that video that we have posted. Now, something that we do every night at Cow Live is a time where we can engage with the story together as a community, where on the screen will pop up some questions that you can answer in the chat. And so we wanted to continue to do that because we think it's really healthy and good. And so in a moment, we're going to have some questions on the screen. And just as a reminder, this is an especially an important time to be serious and engage with the questions that we have listed.
awesome, guys. Thank you for engaging so honestly with that. This community is such an important place to have these conversations. So let's keep having them. I saw someone ask on there, what does lament mean? That's a great question. As we've gone through this series, we've tried to give you tools that you can use to help process this in your own lives. Lament is a fancy word. It just means to mourn together. It's a practice that the church has done for thousands of years. Even in the Bible, you see people lamenting hard things. And so tomorrow or tonight, we're going to throw out a video where Heather talks about how we can lament as a community. So look for that. That'll be a helpful tool. I'm seeing a ton of questions as well about our Zoom calls from fifth graders especially. We are going to that right now. So you made it. It's happening. So here's the deal. In the description below me, it has a bunch of Zoom links. A lot of you guys have done Zoom links before. Your parents can help you too. So how to get in those, you just click on that link. Some of them have a password. Fifth grade one, there is a password on there, so you're going to use the password on there. If you're on a phone, it's going to be a lot easier if you can get to a computer, but I think you can do it from your phone too. You just got to be able to get into the description. So I edited the description and put it there. You might need to refresh your screen, but we are going to go to our Zoom calls. Fifth graders, we love you. We are so glad you guys joined us. All of you guys, you are heroes. If you want to participate in that worship video we're putting together for next week, shoot me a text. You guys know how to get a hold of me. We'll make that happen too. Zoom links are below me. Heather wants to say bye though.
Bye, guys. Fifth graders, I'm so glad you're with us now. We'll see you soon. Love you guys. Bye.